The Urbanist is brought to you in association with the Department of Culture and Tourism, Abu Dhabi. Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi is a beacon of hope and inspiration. A catalyst to spark growth and collaboration with museums and experiences, where art and science and nature and technology coexist.
The belief of Abu Dhabi that culture is the backbone of our society.
Stay tuned for a special episode of the show, in which you can hear His Excellency Mohammed Khalifa Al Mubarak explain exactly why and how Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi is the perfect place to collaborate, create and innovate. Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi, proud partner of The Urbanist on Monocle Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Urbanist, Monocle's programme all about the built environment. I'm your host, Andrew Tuck. Coming up,
the local community started taking ownership of the space before its creation, which is very important.
We're in south-east London to explore some modern developments in an historic park in the UK capital. Then, as we start to wave goodbye to summer, well, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have time for one last ice cream as we head to Canada to consider how ice cream shop owners and urbanists think alike. And we hop off at a few of India's train stations to learn about a new scheme hoping to modernise more than 1,000 of the country's railway hubs. All that coming up over the next 30 minutes right here on The Urbanist with me, Andrew Tuck. Crystal Palace Park is a famed green space in the UK capital, known for being the place where the extraordinary cast iron and plate glass exhibition hall of the same name was moved at the conclusion of the 1851 Great Exhibition. The so-called palace was destroyed by a fire in 1936, but the park still holds many historic landmarks, including Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins' Crystal Palace dinosaurs, Victorian-era interpretations of dinosaurs, which date all the way back to 1854. Plans are underway for a regeneration now of the park, and details of this next exciting phase were devised by the London-based design practice HTA Design. Natalia Rousseau is a landscape designer director at HTA Design, and Monocle's Carlotta Rebella recently spoke with her in our studios. Carlotta began by asking for some background on Crystal Palace Park and the features that make it so special.
Crystal Palace Park was created in the 1850s by Sir Joseph Paxton, and it's one of the first ever theme parks. It was created to house Crystal Palace itself after the Great Exhibition. Crystal Palace was the largest ever glass and iron building, so it was from its early days an international destination. So you had railway lines built in the years to come to allow visitors to access the park, and it was a theme park in the sense that it portrayed a journey in time, as Paxton described it. So starting from the prehistory at the lower section of the park, the tidal lakes, this is where the famous dinosaur sculptures are. This is what a lot of people know the park about, all the way up to the Victorian sophistication of the Crystal Palace itself. So this transition throughout time was the first of its kind in a way.
Now, this is a Grade 2 listed park, which means there's a lot of considerations when trying to do anything in it.
With Grade 1 listed structures, the dinosaurs are Grade 1 listed structures, so even higher.
Yeah. So tell us about the challenges here of embarking on such a restoration program, and what is the vision behind it?
First of all, it's worth saying that we were extremely fortunate to start from a baseline and a survey work that Historic England put together a few years ago. So we had these surveys assessing the status, the condition of the sculptures to start from, which gave us a great baseline to start from. So the challenges then, of course, were how to respond to the needs, the conservation needs of the sculpture, whilst creating a park for the future, a park that is climate resilient, biodiverse, a park that can cope with the demands of a growing population around it. So the way that we addressed this was by, first of all, ensuring that we had all experts around the table on day one. So HTA Design is the lead consultant of a large multidisciplinary team of 20 different specialists, so making sure that we had conservators together with ecologists, with engineers, and getting everyone to feed into the process of assessing, first of all, the significance of the historic assets and then identifying areas where this is a priority and other areas in the park where we can accommodate change, other areas that can be designed to host events, other areas that can be enhanced to promote biodiversity and allow nature to return to the park.
Well, I want to stay on that point of biodiversity and nature, because a big part of this proposal, as you were describing, is about this enhancing of the park's green spaces. And we know that is an effort that a lot of cities around the world are embarking on, in increasing tree canopy, in making more resilient and sustainable choices so that they can be better prepared for the future. What were some of the considerations made here to not only make the park more climate resilient, but also more pleasant as well for people to involve the surrounding community and to make sure these will be green spaces that are used by all?
So that was one of the most important strategies in a way, bringing biodiversity into the park, making a park that's climate resilient, but a park that is also usable. And the way to do this is adaptability. In a way, designing a park that can cope with change. So part of the proposal is to bring back the horticultural wonder that in the 1850s was created through annual bedding and manicured lawns in a different way, in a way that requires less maintenance and allows for diverse habitat creation. So we are introducing swathes of annual and perennial meadows that can be managed in different ways. They can flower at different times of the year, but they can also be cut down to allow for large festivals. So this flexible way of dealing with large areas of planting that can boost biodiversity, introduce seasonal interest and colour, but without requiring that heavy maintenance, and can cope better with a changing climate, ensuring that we have drought-tolerant species, ensuring also that we design the park in a way that it can manage stormwater. So part of the proposal is sculpting the landscape to introduce rain gardens and swales that can attenuate water. I mean, parks have to work really hard, not only in terms of managing stormwater, but in terms of sequestering carbon and in terms of providing cooling through increased canopy cover. So all of these strategies were critical to the design from the outset. And again, going back to the point of identifying the areas that could accept change, the areas that can accommodate the meadows, new tree planting, and the areas that need to be restored to their original design intent.
Now, the purpose, once the project is completed, is not only to have people travel there and visit, but also that it becomes the local park used by the residents and the surrounding community. Tell me a bit more about that engagement process with the local community. I'm sure there's a lot of strong opinions whenever a cherished piece of urban infrastructure like this park, which is so special, where never plans to change anything come up. So tell me a bit about that engagement and how has it been to work with the community?
So it's a much loved park and it's a culturally significant park. So there was a lot of interest, but also a lot of excitement because there have been various attempts to regenerate the park over the years, but none reached its full potential. So people were really excited to see the idea of change coming forward, and we had a lot of positive feedback on the proposals. And the area that we chose to closely engage with the audience was the play area, which was a lot of fun. So we had different workshops where we invited children and grown-ups to create their favorite dinosaurs, to create fossils, to actively inform the design process and listening their ideas and letting their imagination run wild about what this play space would be was very much part of the creative process. So that was fun, that was exciting, and the local community started taking ownership of the space before its creation, which is very important in the long term.
Yes, because then it helps to feel like it is their park after all.
And protect it, and also, volunteer in the maintenance. Parks are really hard to maintain. There's a lot of cost and a lot of effort going to this. So the more involvement you get from the local community, together with the trust, actually, that's one thing that's worth mentioning. The Crystal Palace Park Trust took over the management of the park since September 2023. So this has made already a big difference to the way the park looks, but having a larger group of volunteers support this in the long term obviously will have a greater effect.
Now, we mentioned in the beginning the fact that you're working here with both Grade 1 and Grade 2 listed structures and infrastructure. Tell me a bit about the difficulties in restoring listed sites and if there were any unique surprises that you came across during this process.
I think what is innovative and fascinating in this process is the fact that we're already embarking on a process of trials and monitoring, working closely with Historic England and these specialist conservators. We are trying different materials and different ways to restore these assets. Obviously, these structures were built 170 years ago, so identifying now the best methods that we can use in this day and time with a view to the weathering and the long-term ability to cope with the changing temperatures is very difficult. So we're taking a year ahead of us to trial and test different methods and then determine which is the best way forward. So I think that's one part of the process that is very interesting. Also, deciding the extent to which we reinstate the original intent or how we can incorporate modern interventions, for example, in terms of accessibility. We're restoring the Italian terraces, which is where the palace once stood, testament to its grand scale. And we have a significant drop of approximately 15 meters from one side to the other. So it means that this is an area that's not accessible to everyone. So working with the heritage architects and accessibility consultants, we found a way to integrate sensitively a ramp amongst these walls so that the terrace can be enjoyed by everyone. So finding how we can incorporate modern interventions in a historic environment was part of the challenges.
Well, you mentioned accessibility there. When I was reading about, the project, I also saw that things that seem so obvious, but that can have a big impact, like changing wayfinding or changing the lighting. Particularly in parks, we know that lighting is very important for safety as well, for the sense of safety. Those small changes make a big impact, don't they?
They do, and they are, so for example, lighting, wayfinding and interpretation, they are the layers that hold the park together. As I said, the park was built as a journey in time, so we have different character areas, and it can feel fragmented at times. So having the site-wide park strategies that will allow people to navigate safely and in a clear way throughout the park are really, really important in the visitor experience.
And Natalia, just finally, what's the next phase for the park? What's the next step you'll be working on? Tell us about it.
Well, the next phase is the first phase. So the focus is on awarding a contract at the start of 2025. And then we have 18 months to build the work, starting with the conservation works, building a new visitor centre, the new play area, restoring the Italian terraces, and introducing a new heritage trail to connect all of this together.
Natalia Russo there, speaking with Carlotta Rebello. How much do ice cream shop owners have in common with urban planners? Well, quite a bit more than you might think. From location to foot traffic, these are all things that ice cream parlour owners need to consider when setting up a new shop. In some Canadian cities, the best ice cream shops are opening branches in redeveloping neighbourhoods. With more cities being built around the 15-minute city concept, many are thinking about local amenities when considering where to live, and ice cream shops are becoming an important ingredient in city building. Monocle's contributing editor, Sheena Roster, takes us around some city ice cream shops in Edmonton to get the scoop on how these owners need to think like city planners.
About 50 city planners, developers, and other city builders gather in the parking lot of a local Dairy Queen, an ice cream franchise with locations all across North America. To be clear, no one here is actually going to Dairy Queen right now. It's just a meeting point. We're gathered as part of a field trip with Build Edmonton, where we'll be touring neighborhoods and trying to figure out how ice cream shop owners actually do think like planners in many ways.
That's like my spin instructor voice. Hey, Courtney. Nice to see you.
Jason Savikse is the Vice President of Strategy and Operations with Build Edmonton Metro, a nonprofit organization that represents over 500 developers, home builders, planners, architects, and basically everyone that's associated with development and building the city. He's one of the co-hosts for today's tour, and he explains how this idea to have this tour came about.
City planners have been talking a lot about walkability, of being able to live close to the amenities, the shops, within 15 minutes of where you live. And I've always said that I live in a 1-minute district because right across from me is a grocery store, there is a brewery, there's a coffee shop, there's a park. And so one day, because I love ice cream, I thought, how long would it take for this ice cream to actually melt? And for me, of course, it was really quick to eat that ice cream, but I thought I live within 2 minutes of an ice cream shop. Honestly, ice cream shops are sort of like an indicator of walkability. If you're able to bring your ice cream home, if you haven't finished it within your walk, without it melting, that is like the surefire indicator that you're living in a walkable neighborhood.
And since you can't plan and design a city behind a desk, on today's tour, we'll be weaving through a 10-kilometer stretch in the central part of the city while visiting new housing developments and 4 different ice cream shops. Here's Jason again.
Ice cream shop owners and developers and home builders, while they are in different sectors, they're all about doing the same thing, which is about building and investing in communities. And so the question that we're going to be answering today on this tour is, ice cream shop owners and developers ask the same questions. Should I invest here?
And we'll be doing all of this using some soft transportation, if you will, on these Lime electric scooters. Our first stop is in front of 50-year-old affordable housing townhomes. The aging properties sit kitty-corner to the city's oldest mall, which is having vendors slowly empty out. These townhomes are being redeveloped over the next 15 years to become new apartment buildings. And all the current residents will still have homes here as developers slowly demolish sections of the complex while slowly relocating residents into what will be new housing. This move will increase more affordable housing in the country, helping with the housing crisis that's being felt across Canada right now.
Hi everyone, I hope everyone can hear me okay. So right across the street here, you're looking at the Brentwood townhomes. It's an important piece of the Brentwood.
Brian Murray is a partner at B&A Studios, and he is working on the redevelopment project here. He says that this development is part of a bigger vision of city building.
The heart of this community is the Brentwood townhomes. And so one of the important sites that's actually going to be right across from this intersection that we're looking at is going to be a publicly accessible park, as well as some small-scale commercial units, of which we've always contemplated a ice cream shop. So something for the kids who are in the development to come and play and hang out, large park space, have your ice cream, throw the frisbee, that type of thing. So I would say it was foundational to some of the thinking around that public realm experience.
An investment into more storefronts in neighborhoods, despite the city's frigidly cold winters, is becoming more attractive to small business owners like ice cream shop owners, as opposed to the trends of being in a mall like what was popular a few decades ago.
But it's really the tenants that are the lifeblood and the energy and the DNA of a lot of our product. And without them, really, you can do all the nice architecture you want, but vacant space doesn't do you any good.
On one of our real estate stops, Chris DeLaba, a developer with Calidus Developments, explains about the changing culture here in Canada around embracing the outdoors.
Shopping malls were really a byproduct of the massive urbanization that took place in this country through the 50s, 60s, 70s, which continues today. I mean, our cities are still growing out. However, not a lot of new malls are being built. In fact, a lot of malls are demalling. Instead of being more interior, opening up to the outside. We're embracing that as a winter city, and we're using more winter design architectural features, right, from lighting to color. One of the reasons why a lot of our cities in Canada have kind of tried to internalize and turn our back on winter is that we have a lot of our influence from the United States. And we took a lot of the development cues from what happened south of the border. We're looking at kind of breaking out of that.
And post-lockdown, too, being outside and in neighborhoods despite the cold now has become normalized, even in a city as cold as Edmonton.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
That's Romeo Rapoli, the co-owner of Twice Cream, an ice cream shop in the west central neighborhood of Westmount. With his black apron on, he sits on a picnic table outside the quaint local shop that's nestled among the tree-lined streets in this mature neighborhood. He's enjoying an ice cream while taking a break from the kitchen. Having formerly worked as a home builder and now as an ice cream shop owner, Romeo knows what it's like to be on both sides of the equation. He says the secret to planning where you want to put an ice cream shop isn't as complicated as you might think.
They just need to think like customers, and not even just the family with the kids. They need to think of the new generation that is looking for a better quality product and in better neighborhoods. Like, we need better neighborhoods with better quality product. You're going to be really hard pressed to find really high quality premium products that are artisanal in really bad neighborhoods. And so if we build the neighborhoods to attract the kind of customers that require product like that, then you will attract the businesses that come with that too.
And other ice cream shop owners in the city are taking on the mentality of, if you build it, they will come.
My name's Yuko Takasaki. I'm the owner of White Rabbit Ice Cream. So we facilitate all sorts of moments, from celebrations to a little bit of ice cream therapy after a tough day. We've seen it all, and it's just really, really special to be a place that can facilitate those kinds of things.
Now, the area where Yuko's ice cream parlor is located has a different feel than the Westmount area where Twice Cream is. But as Yuko explains, when taking into consideration the foot traffic in the area, she hopes to be able to start building a more commercially successful area for food and beverage businesses like her own through customers who want to eat their quality product.
When we were looking at the neighborhood that we're in, we were really intrigued by the community. In our neighborhood specifically, we have a really dense residential area. We have a bottle depot, so there's lots of car traffic. We have a university just next door, so lots of students and staff. So it was just a really diverse traffic, just a really great neighborhood to be a part of.
And for Yuko, like a city builder, the joy for her comes from the sense of purpose and place her ice cream shop has on people's daily lives.
My favorite part of ice cream is there's this little journey that the ice cream takes as we pass it from our hand to the customer's hand. And you can tell whether they're having a good day or a bad day, that ice cream is magical. You see just 1%, they're a little lighter, they're a little happier, and it's just really special to be a part of that. It's serotonin all day long.
For Monocle Radio in Edmonton, I'm Sheena Rossiter.
While many countries are famed for their efficiency on two rails, almost no country is more recognised for the good, the bad, and the downright crazy of their trains than India. A foundational part of the land transport system, as well as a pop culture touchstone, when it comes to India, train travel is iconic. But there is certainly room for improvement when it comes to getting around by rail. Mitu Mathur is a third-generation architect and director at GPM Architects and Planners, a firm that has an extensive portfolio through the Indian subcontinent. Well, she joins me now down the line from Delhi to discuss the Amrit Bharat Station Scheme, a project which aims to modernise 1,275 railway stations across the country, and of which 20 stations have fallen in Mitu and GPM's hands. Mitu, thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps start by telling us a little bit more about this project.
Firstly, I'd like to briefly talk about the urbanization in Indian context and the importance of these projects henceforth. So we all know that, Indian population is growing by the minute, and there is really a need to kind of look at how the old existing urban infrastructure can be strengthened and actually can become the binding factors for the city, because the cities are essentially growing horizontally. So what we are seeing is a lot of urbanization spreading outwards. Hence, this kind of a project wherein all urban nodes are looked at in terms of revitalisation and in terms of binding the city together become very critical.
So give me an example of the kinds of things that you're looking at as you begin this project.
So when Amrit Bharat scheme was launched, essentially the vision of it came from the fact that Indian Railways has the largest network of railways in the world. And it essentially connects the entire diverse cultural landscape that our country has. So it's not just about one station in a city, it's about connecting the entire country together. So the vision is to kind of revitalize and redevelop 1250 or 1275 stations across the country. Out of those stations, we are currently working on almost 24 stations in phase one. We have been fortunate enough to work with the Ministry of Railways very closely to formulate the area programs, the guidelines, and also understand how these railway stations can actually form urban nodes and hubs in the city. So, for us as urban designers and architects for these projects, our role really starts with looking at the context at a larger level and seeing what is the impact that that particular station has on the area and how we can connect with the other modes of transport to really make a multimodal hub for the city. And also, interestingly, Indian Railways has the second largest land bank in the country. So all the important land parcels which are lying in the center of the city are owned by the Ministry of Railways. So then it gives them a direct incentive to kind of monetize these land parcels and at the same time use that influx of money and energy to kind of revitalize the railway station. So it's like a win-win situation for the government and for the people also. We've been working with the ministry for more than 6 years now, and it has taken us a journey of 6, 7 years to understand how these projects can be viable for the city, also for the government at the same time. We are very fortunate that almost 5 of our projects have begun on ground. On 2 of those stations, the buildings and the structures are also taking shape. And we have successfully casted the bridge that connects 2 sides of the platforms. So, I mean, it's been a very interesting exercise to kind of also implement what you've designed. So we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, yes.
A good metaphor for somebody working on railways. Tell me, Mitu, now, there's someone who's been fortunate to go to India a few times. When you go to an Indian railway station, all life is there already. You know, restaurants, trade, lots of people wanting to travel by rail. They already work often in a way that Europeans, for example, railway stations just don't work. They're not that lively, that full of hub activity. Is it important that you maintain this sense that it's a vibrant place as you redevelop these stations?
Absolutely important. Actually, for us, any railway station is different. Like all the railway stations are different because of the kind of cultural sensitivity that each location requires. Not just culture, I would say, in terms of understanding the movement patterns, in terms of understanding the local mela requirements, which are very seasonal. You know, there are times when, let's say during Eid, there is more movement. During Diwali, there is more movement in certain stations. So understanding the patterns is very important. And also looking at the climate, because some regions are hot, some regions are cold, some are very humid. So it's also equally important to look at that. Now, what you rightly said, that the essence of an Indian railway station is that it is the center where everything is happening. It is where life is of any city. Currently, what the Ministry of Railways is envisioning them to be is to first of all get all the facilities in place, because a lot of these stations, you know, a lot of them were built at the time of the British era and, you know, have very organically developed, but, you know, haven't really been developed to the full potential of what the requirements are for so much population. So the first step is looking at the facilities that are required for those many number of people, for the footfall that the station caters to. So that's like first thing on the agenda. The second thing is the connectivity. So the connectivity from, let's say, the buses to autos, rickshaws, private cabs, taxis and all of those, different modes of transportation, in some places, metros also. So how do we make people go from one place to the other? I mean, you rightly said in Europe, it's pretty seamless because, a lot of times you see the stations stacked up above the metro stations and the bus stop right outside. So it's kind of designed in that manner. But here, I think there's this lack of interconnectivity that is really looked at. It's kind of important. And to our understanding, the third and the most important thing is how do we make these facilities in turn also create some revenue? Because, currently railway platforms are for free, they are for everyone. So, in a way, it's a good thing that, it's a free infrastructure. But eventually, how do we also, by creating organized retail or organized systems of earning money, how do we give facility and at the same time also create a loop of generating income for the railway stations as well? So these couple of parameters that we are looking at. In some stations, we're also looking at, where the footfall is really large, on how we can segregate the arriving and departing passenger movements so that they're not struggling and, fighting with each other for space. And there's a clear demarcation of people when the train is arriving and when it is about to depart. So those are the things that we are kind of working with the government. But I feel the biggest challenge here is not just the design of the station, but also the way the trains operate and if they're running on time or not. And if, those things are also streamlined along with the station design, then I think it will be a win-win situation.
What's amazing is that in a country where this hasn't really been seen before, you're a woman leading this extraordinary project. And we've seen headlines around the world recently about some of the issues facing women in India. What's it been like leading this project?
I personally am quite passionate about public infrastructure, and I get excited when I see people and I get to design for people. So I think that's been one of the reasons why I was very keen on working on these projects and when these opportunities came in. And kudos to my entire team. Like, I have a brilliant team who's working with me. And as a team, we are really trying to figure out our way into the system of working in the government sector. At the same time, bring in, these urban sensibilities, because also it is not very easy to work in the government sector in India. I mean, it's a very different working environment. So coming back to your question, that being a woman, I do agree that, you see news flashes around in terms of challenges faced by women. But culturally, our country respects women, especially in a professional environment. And I feel being a woman, I was privileged because, there are times when I'm in a boardroom full of 40, 50 men and I'm the only woman there, and it's good to stand out. And if I say something, then everybody listens. So it's been an interesting journey, and I think it has worked to my advantage in this particular scenario. And people do remember you, and I think there's a good recall factor also. So that's been one of the reasons why we've been invited multiple times to work on certain projects, certain challenging scenarios. So for my particular situation in this case, it has really worked to our advantage. And I'm really grateful to all those men supporting me in these projects. And there have been very good guides, very good people in the government sector also who have really helped us understand things better and learn and grow as we go from project to project.
Mitu Mathur, Director of GPM Architects and Planners. Thank you for joining us. And that's all for this week's episode of The Urbanist. Remember that you can get new editions of the show every week. Just follow us through your favourite podcast provider. And you can also subscribe to Monocle magazine for regular reports on all things design, architecture, and yes, urbanism. Just visit monocle.com. The Urbanist is produced by Carlotta Rebello and by David Stevens, who also edits the show. I'm Andrew Tuck. Goodbye, and thank you for listening, City Lovers.